Some call him the Phil Still of BYU football. Some call him just maybe the greatest BYU fan ever. His name is Jeff Hansen. He's on today's show. We're talking both BYU basketball and his new college football preview for BYU fans. It's all ahead on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate all of your patronage. We are your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. All right, let's bring in the main attraction of today's podcast. He is Jeff Hansen from Cougar Sports Insider, as well as Give Him Hell Brigham. Jeff, thank you for taking the time. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Jake. Thanks for having me on, man. Hope you're doing good.
I'm doing great. So first things first, let's talk a little basketball out of the chute here. Sunday, BYU got a commitment from Mawot Mag from Rutgers. Now, he's a little bit of an atypical commit that you typically see in college basketball because he makes his bones, if you look at his career throughout college, on the defensive side of the court. But I want your thought. What do you make of this commitment? What do you make of it fitting in with Kevin Young's system so far?
Yeah, the fit's going to be interesting to me. Just where we don't know exactly what KY's offense is going to look like, but we know he wants to run some variation of a 5-out offense. Yeah. How does Mag fit when, Keita is in the lineup at the same time? That seems like two guys who can't play beyond the perimeter. So that's a little bit funny. But I think just in terms of like talent on the roster, BYU's got guys who can score. They need some guys who can defend, and that's what Mag brings to the table. There's no question about it. So I like the pickup, and I think that with two scholarships still remaining, I like that BYU can still go out and find a shooter, find maybe a stretch four. So it's not the last position and this is it. We're going to cram this square peg in a round hole. He's a guy who can bring a lot of value on the defensive side of the ball. And in the Big 12, it's what you got to have: big length and strong defense on the wings.
Well, and I think this is Kevin Young kind of going to his NBA roots, where you traditionally have a guy on the roster who is a quote-unquote defensive stopper, and that's what Mag seems to fit. Like, I'm with you that if he and Keita are on the court together, you're a little bit worried about the spacing and the overall offense. But if you can kind of platoon those two guys, I think it may work out just fine.
Yeah, I think so. I'm excited about it. And I like defense. We saw BYU last year, right? When they got onto the road, it was a different team. Shots don't fall. And they got hammered in the back half of the conference schedule defensively and into the tournament. So a guy who can come in and take that, the opponent's best scorer, best wing guy, whatever it is, he could defend a little bit in the post as well. BYU needs somebody like that. That's what that team was missing last year. Hopefully the points can come. I still think there's enough guys who could score that I'm not too worried about that. But this definitely fills a void that was prevalent last year.
I want to get your thoughts on Kevin Young so far. I've talked on this podcast often. I think everything he touches is turning to gold. He's been a home run hire. What are your impressions of him early on?
Man, I really, really like him. I think the biggest thing, because you can't judge results yet. There haven't been any results. And even on the recruiting trail, at some point, no matter who the coach is, there's going to be guys on the roster. Now, certainly, Yegor Demin, that's a big pickup by any metric. That's enormous. Huge win. KY's done great on the recruiting trail. I don't want to minimize that at all. But where KY has already taken BYU to a different level is with the donor base, man. This is a fan base that they were a little bit reeling after Mark Pope left. It very quickly got dark. And is the Royal Blue going to be able to even sell out their NIL seats along the sideline, right? And then KY comes in, and I think you're seeing a huge investment. Yes, from BYU, right? KY's salary, all that stuff. But a huge investment from donors, specifically on the NIL front. That's how BYU is able to go out and be competitive. That's just what college sports are now. So there's no sense in pretending that it isn't. That's a big deal. So I think that KY's biggest win hasn't been any of these individual players. It's been the excitement he's brought to a donor base that certainly can reach in their pockets and make BYU competitive. But even with Mark Pope, They kind of didn't. They did a little bit, did more last year than they had in the past, but it certainly wasn't at the levels that it is now. Huge testament to what KY is selling to donors and to just that excitement that he brings to the program.
Well, I think you make a very good point there. There were multiple donors who were very much in the Mark Pope camp and were obviously willing to donate, but there were others that just, as you kind of alluded to, they weren't all in with what Pope was selling or whatever. They weren't all in with BYU basketball. Kevin Young, he's been able to galvanize the entire group of them. And you're right, the investment, it's at an all-time high, it feels like.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think it's good timing. I mean, it's a fan base that is pretty down collectively on football. And KY came in and brought a message that everybody could kind of rally behind. And it's been huge. It's paid off in droves so far. The recruiting has been great to get guys like Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders. Look, those don't happen without NIL. I mean, let's just not, there's no sense in pretending any other reason is there. Sure, they love BYU, all that stuff. That's all well and good. They're not coming back if they don't get paid. And that's a large ability of KY to just come in and say, hey, look, guys, here's the vision. Here's how we're going to do it. And here's what I bring to the table. And people are buying in. That's awesome.
We'll get to football here in a moment. I just want one more question from you. Right now, obviously, you said we don't have any on-court results, and we won't have that for months. So they don't tip off until November. So that's obviously a long ways off. But as things look right now, are you in the camp that you think BYU can do better than their fifth place finish a year ago? Or are they right in that same realm in your mind right now?
You know, I think they're right in that same realm and maybe a little worse. Now, in the offseason, when everybody's looking at BYU, when BYU fans are looking at BYU, I tend to look at everybody else. Yeah. The Big 12 got a heck of a lot better this year. I mean, across the board, the top of the Big 12 is better. Kansas brings most of their studs back. Remember, they were injured last year. You add Arizona into the mix. Houston reloaded. Baylor's been on a tear. The rest of the Big 12 got better. Now, BYU did too, but the rest of the Big 12 did as well. So I think that fifth seed is probably the ceiling right now. Obviously, there's still 2 scholarships left to fill, and BYU can do a lot of things with those. But right now, I have BYU kind of in the middle of the pack, not because BYU is not better, but because the rest of the Big 12 is a lot better as well.
Well, yeah, and the metrics indicate as such. Funny enough, last year, the Big 12, by their own standards, was actually down. I know that's crazy to consider, but if you look at it, just compared to previous seasons, they actually were a little bit further down than they typically are. And you're right, they've all kind of reloaded in that sense. One other one real quick, 2 more scholarships. What do you want to see? I'm a guy who's been on the bandwagon. I want to see a rim rolling big, a true 7-footer if they can find it. What do you want to see on the roster still?
Yeah, I think I would as well. So it looks like they need some size. I mean, even just somebody to come in and foul, right? When you play Hunter Dickinson at Kansas, you know that the ball's going to go down to the low post and he's 7'3" or whatever he is. You're going to need some size down there. Keita and Foose, that's probably not going to get it done against Hunter Dickinson. So go and get somebody else. Go get some size. I also, get the best player available. With these last couple of scholarships, you could make an argument that BYU's rotation is full as it is right now, right? So go get somebody who's going to challenge that rotation. And I think BYU can still do that, but I'm with you. Find somebody to at least be a post defender, eat up some fouls, somebody to kind of fill that Atiki role last year. I mean, if nothing else, that's what Atiki was able to do. And I don't see anybody who's able to fill that role yet on the roster.
Well, hey, there's one thing that Tiki was good for. You knew he had 5 fouls and he knew how to use them. There's no doubt about that. So we'll see how it goes with hoops. But obviously a big pickup with Mawot Mag adding to the mix here for Kevin Young. All right, Jeff, it's time to get to why we brought you on the show. Everybody wants to hear about your preview that you just recently published. We'll get to that next. We roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. Of course, LinkedIn is here for you guys when you're hiring for your small business. You want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They are here for you guys to make sure that you have the best candidates available to you guys. The best part is they have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team, and they do it faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Over 70% of LinkedIn users on a monthly basis, don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place, and over 86% of small businesses are getting a qualified candidate within the first 24 hours of their job posting on LinkedIn. Hire professionals like a professional and do it with our friends at LinkedIn. They know small businesses are wearing many hats and may not have the adequate time or resources to make the right hires. So they want to help you guys out and make that as simple as possible. More than 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. Why aren't you? So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post that job for free. Of course, terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. All right, so continuing with Jeff Hansen here. And Jeff, you recently just published a 135-page college football preview, and it's specific for BYU fans. I'm not going on a limb when I say you've become the Phil Steele of Cougar Nation out there. Give me the background on how you got into this in the first place. This is the second annual edition. I have both versions. I read last year's cover to cover. I'm about 2/3 of the way through this year's one. Give me the impetus of why you went about doing this.
I love preseason magazines, and last year I read I can't remember if it was Athlon or Lindy's, whichever one I read first, and I just was so underwhelmed by the content that it had specific to BYU. So I threw it out there on I guess Twitter back then. I threw it out on Twitter and was like, hey, is there any interest in something like this? If I wrote something that is a preseason magazine in the ilk of a Phil Steele or an Athlon or whatever, but specific to BYU, what do the fans say? And there was an overwhelming response that, hey, that seems like something that would be interesting. That was it. That's how it got started. So last year, it was kind of quickly thrown together. I think I put it together in about 3.5 weeks. Took a lot of effort, a lot of late nights. This year, I knew I was going to do it a lot more prepared, a lot more in depth. I think that the content is a little bit more creative, and probably more of what I want this to be each and every year with a little bit more time and a little bit more planning. It's a ton of fun. So it's a preseason magazine that really is just specifically tailored to BYU. So BYU fans don't have to waste money on Phil Steele or Athlon, or if you do, please do. They're still great, but you could scratch the BYU itch a little bit more specifically with my preseason magazine.
Well, and I will back you up on that, because it really does feel super in depth, because you know this, when you have so many teams, 134 now in the FBS level, Phil still does an incredible job, but it's 134 teams, and you're trying to pack that into 300 pages. Yeah, you're going to have to skimp on a few things, and it feels like at times BYU can be one of those schools that they're like, all right, let's go surface level, but not much further than that. And I appreciate what you've done with this. Now, with this preview, we're talking, it's got opponent previews, position previews. You've got thoughts on the program as a whole right now, and that's where my next question for you comes. You mentioned a little bit earlier on, there may be a little bit of malaise here for BYU fans with the football program, especially with all the things the basketball program is doing right now. Where do you see Cougar Nation right now? Do you feel like they've essentially checked out on BYU football, or are they just waiting for results before they buy in?
It's a good question. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think BYU fans have checked out on BYU football. I think BYU fans have let 4 games of pretty bad quarterback play just poison the entire well. And look, let's not sugarcoat it. Jake Retzlaff, he wasn't good last year. And the rest of the quarterback position, it wasn't good last year. There were a lot of things that were wrong with the offense. So to pin all the blame on the quarterback is probably irresponsible. But I think that's what's happened, right? I mean, for better, worse, fair, unfair, the quarterback is being blamed. The quarterback probably gets too much praise when things are good. And right now, when BYU football doesn't have a good quarterback, it's really kind of hard to get excited about BYU football. So I think that is probably it. So maybe they buy in, the collective fan base. Maybe they buy in if Jake Retzlaff comes out and is great against Southern Illinois and SMU, or if McKay Hillstead or Gerry Bohanon, if somebody else beats him out, then maybe there's a little bit of hope immediately injected into the program. Because I think outside of the quarterback position, every other position group has a really strong argument to make that they've got better, and in some cases significantly better this year. It's just that one super important quarterback spot that kind of has everybody protecting themselves a little bit. No sense in diving in and having high hopes if the quarterback isn't going to work out.
Well, I don't know if you read this. I read the anonymous coach's take on BYU from Athlon just not too long ago. And one of the coaches there said that BYU learned the hard and fast truth of the Big 12. And I'm paraphrasing here. Essentially, the back half of their schedule last year, they ran out of depth. They weren't able to replace guys that were injured, Ben Bywater, et cetera, with adequate depth there. And they also figured, they said in the second season, they'll be better in terms of being able to compete at that level. And I'm with you on that. Yes, the quarterback position, yeah, you need to have a guy there who can help elevate your program. But if you look across the roster for BYU, I think they've done a very, very fine job at either upgrading or just essentially betting on continuity and just an improvement on the roster itself in improving this football program.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even on the quarterback spot, I mean, you know this, Jake. You and I have called a lot of high school football games. McKay Hillstead is a dog. If he can stay healthy, he's the real deal at quarterback. And even Jake Retzlaff, Gerry Bohanon, we know what he is. We've seen him. If he's healthy, you still kind of know what to expect. But Jake Retzlaff, he's only played 4 games, and he wasn't getting starter reps last year either. I mean, he really wasn't seeing a ton of practice time until probably halfway through the season. So there's hope that he can improve. John Beck was pretty terrible his first 4 games as a freshman as well. BYU stuck with Beck. It panned out. Obviously a good thing for the Cougars. I don't think Jake is going to be John Beck, but guys can get better. And I think that Jake will get a little bit better as well. And then, the rest of the position groups, man, I really am optimistic. The offensive line in particular. I don't know that the talent, you lose a guy like Kingsley, I don't know that you can make an argument the talent is better, but just with coaching, the talent wasn't the issue last year. And I think the coaches, you look at their actions, right? Words are words, but look at what the coaches did. Not only did they immediately fire Daryl Funk and bring in TJ Woods, they went out of their way to get guys to come back, guys like Connor Pay and Braden Keim. They wanted everybody back. So they didn't look at that and say, wow, we are totally deficient of talent. They looked at that and said, we had a coaching problem. We got to figure that out. TJ Woods, throughout his career, when he has talent on his roster, he's the real deal. Whether it's at Wisconsin, Utah State, Oregon State, when he has dudes to work with, he produces elite level results. And I don't use that word lightly, elite level rushing results. Look at his career. It's been recruiting that's kind of his bugaboo. And I think that he's showing so far that he's on the right track there. But on the field, man, I think that anybody who's a fan of offensive line play should be excited about the future of the offensive line at BYU.
Yeah, most of our listeners, they're familiar. Connor's been on this podcast for the better part of a year now, and he's been adamant, Jeff, since the TJ Woods hire, that if they not brought TJ Woods in, he's likely playing elsewhere. He was very clear about that. But at the same time, since spring camp got started, they've gotten into this offseason, he has been very praiseworthy of what TJ has offered. And Connor, for his own part, I can tell you, just based on the conversations we've had, he's doing a lot of work behind the scenes as well. He was not happy with how things went last year. So obviously we'll see what happens on the O-line. I want to get your thought on LJ Martin. I think that he is poised to really break out. I walked out there during spring camp and looked at the roster, and they listed him 20 pounds heavier. And I was like, okay, is this 20 pounds they're just putting on the roster to make him sound bigger? And all of a sudden he walked by me. I'm like, okay, LJ Martin's grown up a little bit. He had a good at least 15 pounds, if not that full 20. Your thoughts on him running behind that O-line, because that feels like it's a really, really important factor for whoever the quarterback is.
Yeah, no, I love what LJ brings to the table. Look, last year was a bonus, right? We shouldn't have expected LJ Martin to be the guy as a true freshman. The fact that he showed up and he was able to win that job so quickly, there are a lot of things that had to go, had to happen in order for LJ to get that job. Aiden Robbins had to disappoint. Deion Smith wasn't great. So there was a lot of other factors too. But when LJ got the call, he was ready to roll. That was a bonus. This is the year that BYU coaches were expecting him to really start to find his rhythm. And he's there. He's got the size. It's just grown man strength, right? He was 18 years old. He went to prom like 6 months before he showed up and was on the field. Now he's got grown man strength. He's ready to roll. I would expect big things from LJ Martin. Now, what is big things? I don't expect him to be Ollie Gordon. I don't think he's going to win the Doak Walker or anything like that. But he's a guy that he's going to be able to get you first downs. He's going to consistently move the chains. And if he ends the year knocking on the door of 1,000 yards, that's a hugely successful season relative to where BYU's rushing game was last year. I think there's some other running backs in the room who are also going to surprise. So I don't think LJ is going to have to carry the ball, a Tyler Algier type load where he's toting the rock 30 times a game. But I do think he's going to be the bell cow guy. He's going to get 20 carries a game, and hopefully he stays healthy and is able to hit that 1,000-yard mark.
All right. Last thing on the offense, I want to ask you about some of the defensive on the defensive side of the football. Keanu Hill making the transition to tight end. I know that we only saw glimpses of the team in spring ball, us that are able to go down to practice, but he looks like a natural addition at tight end. Your thoughts on him and maybe the wide receiver core by extension, what you're expecting from the pass catchers as it is?
Yeah, I really, we know what Keanu Hill is as a pass catcher, right? I mean, he's able to get in and create mismatches. He'll create more mismatches from the tight end spot. So I'm excited to see that aspect of it. I'm excited to see what he does as a blocker, because if all he's able to do is line up as an X receiver, you can call him whatever you want. You're going to defend him the same way, right? So he's got to be able to prove that he's a threat in the run game. He's a big body, and he was always a willing blocker when he was a wide receiver. So I don't think that there's going to be an issue there. But blocking linebackers in the box and blocking cornerbacks out, in the backfield, that's different. Those are two different things. So how does Keanu Hill get ready for that physicality inside the box? He's not going to have to do it the same that, Matava Taase did. It's not going to be like that, but he's going to have to be able to do it in order to get those mismatches. I think he can. And if he can, then I look at Dalton Kincaid a couple of years ago, the skill set. Will Keanu Hill beat Dalton Kincaid? I have no idea. But the skill set, the way they use their bodies, it's very, very similar. And I think that's, obviously the best case scenario for BYU. And then beyond that, to the rest of the receivers, it all comes down to health. I really like this wide receiver group. Fesi Sitake continues to just quietly produce on the recruiting trail. It seems like every year I'm talking about it, I say, it's just maybe the best wide receiver class that he's had, maybe best ever that we've had. And that's kind of what Fesi's just done again and again and again. And this year's no different. Chase Roberts, he needs to take a step forward this year. He's been really, really good, but now's the time for him to be that wide receiver one. If he can do that, the rest of the pieces are there. The depth is there to be a very, very good receiver group for BYU.
All right, we'll talk defense here in just a moment. I got a couple of questions about what Jeff's expecting, especially from the defensive front. That was a big weakness a year ago. We'll get into that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, of course, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL playoffs. The NBA Finals poised to begin later this week. Also, the NHL playoffs rolling on. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home the big win of your own with our friends. Once again, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You think the Dallas Mavericks are going to win it all? You think the Boston Celtics are going to win it all? And how many games? You can do all that with our friends at FanDuel. And once again, it's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Our friends at FanDuel have BYU football. We've been talking with Jeff about it. 4.5 wins, the over-under for BYU over at FanDuel. If you think that they can go over on that, you can take that $150 with that first bet win and put it all on BYU this fall. So take advantage of it now and visit FanDuel.com/logtown to make every playoff shot count. Once again, that's all courtesy of friends at FanDuel. Once again, FanDuel.com/logtown to get started today. It's all courtesy of FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Rolling along here with Jeff Hansen from Cougar Sports Insider, as well as Give 'em Hell Brigham. And Jeff, I'm going to give you a chance to explain. I've had actually a couple people ask me, Jake, do you know what Jeff and Garrett, and I know Robbie just joined you guys on Give 'em Hell Brigham, what is the community you guys are doing over at GAHB?
Yeah, man, it's a ton of fun. So what we do, we've sort of pivoted. We still have a newsletter. We're a newsletter, but we're a Discord community. And really the way that we kind of look at this, we're just like the tailgate before the game, and if you're at a tailgate, there's going to be information that flies. You're going to have, you're going to talk X's and O's and things like that. That happens. And it certainly happens over at Give 'em Hell Brigham, but also just being friends, right? Just having a community. That's really what is kind of the most unique thing about BYU football, more than any other school that I've been to, is we have this common thread that sort of, binds us all together, even outside of just football, right? And so it's a ton of fun, and it's really easy at BYU to become friends with the season ticket holder next to you, or to become friends with the guys in the tailgate lot. And that's kind of what we've tried to do, but the internet version of that, there's always a conversation going in the summer, in the doldrums of information when the coaches are on vacation. GEHB is still popping. We're just hanging out at the tailgate lot, getting ready for kickoff, getting ready for tip-off. So that's what we do. It's a ton of fun. Give'emHellBrigham.com or GEHB.co. And you can join and join the community. And we try to just do good things, try to just have fun and make BYU football, BYU athletics a little bit more fun than just the game days.
Well, it's going to get pretty lean here, as you mentioned, in July. These coaches go on vacation, and the information essentially dries up for a good spell. So if you can keep that pipeline going, that's obviously a big thing. So check that out, everybody. All right, defensive side of the football here, Jeff. Now, Jay Hill, I think he's an absolutely incredible coach. I think given the adequate time, the resources, and more importantly, as he gets to work in the recruiting ranks, he's going to have BYU's defense operating the way that he wants it to be. It's probably going to take a little more time than last year and also maybe this year to really get it to peak efficiency in his mind. But do you feel like this defense top to bottom is better this year than it was a year ago?
Yeah. I mean, it's an easy yes. If nothing else, they're healthier right now, right? I mean, how many safeties had to play last year? They went through like what, 7, 8 different safeties. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're healthier, and I think you talked about it, right? That other coaches had talked about the back half, the Big 12 schedule. BYU learned that depth matters, right? They did, and they've added depth, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But the benefit to taking those lumps and playing guys that maybe weren't ready to play last year is that's all experience that's going to matter a whole lot this year. That's how you build depth really, really quickly, is take your lumps and throw guys out there who maybe weren't quite ready, because that just accelerates that readiness process. The best example that everybody can point to is Chris Wilcox, right? We all remember Chris Wilcox against Toledo. He was terrible. He should not have been on the field, but he took his lumps, and lo and behold, he's in the NFL and was drafted a few years later. I think BYU got a little taste of that. Maybe not quite that much, but a little taste of that last year with some of the guys who were on the field.
Now, defensive lines obviously going to have to step up in a big way, and Jay was very clear about it. He said our D-line needs to produce more. That's sacks. It's holding up better against the run across the board. Now, you bring in a guy like Danny Saili, like they did out of the junior college ranks, and then he exits the program right after spring ball. And trust me, I had a couple of people reach out to me. What are they going to do on the D-line, Jake? Here's the thing. You mentioned the health. John Nelson being healthy, just essentially the defensive tackle position being healthy should yield better defensive line play. So let's start there. The interior BYU's defensive line, is it good enough to hold up against the powerful rushing attacks, the Ollie Gordons of the Big 12?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like the way you phrased it. Is the defensive line good enough to hold up against these rushing attacks? Yes. Is the defensive line going to look like the Star Lotulelei defenses of Utah in the past? No, that's not what BYU is equipped to do this year. But on the interior, they've got guys that can be a little bit more aggressive. They're not just going to be gap stuffers that just sit there and get pushed around. They've got guys who can shoot gaps. They've got guys who can make plays. But I want to start on the outside, because I think that the better players on the outside and the talent on the outside allows BYU to move a guy like Blake Mangelson. You're probably going to see a lot more of him on the interior this year, because he's not going to have to be that pass rushing threat. So he can bring those pass rushing skills, put on a little bit more weight, and bring that to the interior of the defensive line. I think you're going to see a lot of that this year. Sonny Tawala was a big signing, chose BYU over Utah, Washington, a handful of others. I've heard he's pushing 290, 295 now. So if he's on the inside, that's a big win for BYU. David Latu, you mentioned John Nelson. So they've got guys, certainly, that are better and more equipped to play. And that's not even talking about Luke Tuamalatai, who will join, who I'm really, really excited about. I think he was a little under-recruited because of the JUCO he came from. But you watch him play, and he plays really, really aggressively from that defensive tackle spot. He is a gap shooter, so he plays with the defensive end mentality. He's going to have to be disciplined, and we'll see how that develops over time. But in pass rushing situations, to have a threat like that from the inside of the defensive line that has to take some attention from a guard and let your defensive ends have a little bit more one-on-one, that's huge. So I like where BYU's defensive line is at, and I know that the coaches do as well. When a guy like Danny Saili leaves, and look, whether Danny Saili was going to be the guy on the field or not, anytime somebody leaves, there's always the insider, the rumor that's heard from, somebody said something that he's not ready to go or he's out of shape. Take that for what it's worth. Whether it's true, whether it's not, I don't know. But Danny Saili was supposed to be a guy who was going to play a lot, and he left, and BYU didn't panic and go and emergency add somebody out of the portal. That tells me that they are a lot more confident with the guys that are in the room than I thought they would be. And maybe they thought they would be last December when they signed Danny Saili to begin with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think spring ball, taught them a lot about the overall ability of the D-line itself. Now, a lot of BYU fans are going to say, well, what about improving sacks? What about improving the pass rush? I can tell you, Ephraim Asiata, he was only in spring camp for a little bit before he picked up a minor injury that knocked him out for the rest of it. He looked the part as a pass rusher. He's probably going to be a specialist in that regard early on in his career, but Tyler Batty's back for another year. What's your confidence level that the sack production, just the overall pressure, will be ratcheted up here?
Yeah, whether they get home and have the sacks, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a hard metric to predict a lot of the time, but I do think there's going to be more havoc for sure. I think Isaiah Banya with another year in the defense, he takes a step forward. I really love Tyler Batty. Tyler Batty, if you go back and watch all 12 games last year, the dude saw double teams more than anybody. I mean, maybe more than anybody in the conference, not because he was so elite, but because there just was nothing there on the inside of the defensive line. So Batty got two guys just about every single play. And if he wasn't getting the double team from the guard and the tackle, he was getting a chip from the running back. I mean, he's going to have a lot more opportunities with a little bit of a better threat on the inside of the defensive line for BYU. So I like Batty. I love a fat boy, Ephraim Asiata. I think he's going to take a big step this year. He's ready to roll, right? I mean, he's got all the skills. He's just got to have size. I honestly think his injury might be a blessing in disguise in spring ball because he can get into the weight room, maybe not have to focus so much on the playbook. Now hey, I got to rehab. I got to get ready because I think he's naturally playbook ready. I think he's a football player. He's just got to get physically ready. So hopefully he shows up to fall camp a little bit bigger than he was. And then we mentioned guys like Tuala. Maybe he plays inside, but he's certainly capable of playing outside. Kini Laufonahema is the real deal out of Springville. So I like the talent there on the edges for sure.
Now, linebacker position, Ben Bywater, we're expecting him back to kind of be the heart and soul of this defense because he's been for the last 3 years. But they had Jack Kelly from Weber State, and you went to a lot of Weber State games. I saw a lot of the film from him. I'm enthralled with what this kid can bring to the field. What are you expecting from him at the linebacker spot?
Dude, Jack Kelly's the real deal. He's immediately BYU's best NFL prospect right now. People think I'm crazy when I say that, but he is. You watch what he did at Weber. Now, you have to take everything with that FCS grain of salt, right? But you watch what he did at Weber State, and you have a really, really hard time not saying, wow, he looks a lot like Kyle Van Noy out there. Because that's what he does. He does it at all levels of the defense. He's there in coverage. He's in the backfield. He's fitting gaps in the run game. He does everything. His high school story is super interesting. He was a BMX guy that just decided to play football on a whim, went out and played football. He was on a really, really good Kearns team that got derailed by COVID in 2020. I think had he had a regular senior year, he probably ends up at Utah. I mean, that's probably where he was going to go. Maybe even follows Jeffrey Bassa, his teammate, to Oregon. So BYU, I mean, his loss is BYU's gain. That COVID year was a little bit funny for him. He ends up at Weber State, and now he's at BYU. He knows the defense already. Jack Kelly's the real deal. People should buy into the hype of Jack Kelly. And I know there's a lot of hype, but if he's healthy, he can live up to all of it for sure.
Now, you mentioned the fact that they played so many safeties a year ago. The cornerback position was pretty solid, all things considered. Camden Garrett, Eddie Heckard, Jacob Robinson, those three were the main guys. Just the back end as a whole, what are you expecting?
Yeah, I think that Jacob Robinson's great. We all know who he is. I wish he was a little bit bigger because if BYU doesn't have a bigger corner, then you're going to see teams with those bigger receivers pick on Jacob Robinson like they did last year. He's got to get bigger, a little bit more physical. If he does that, I think he's an NFL corner because he's got such great ball skills and he's proven everything else on tape. I like Mark Collins. People don't know this about Mark Collins. At Weber State, he started over Eddie Heckard. He started over Cam Garrett. He just had injuries those last couple of years, so those other guys rose up and certainly took advantage of their opportunity. If Collins is healthy, which he wasn't during spring ball, so still a problem, right? But if Collins is healthy, he's the real deal. I think BYU needs another corner. I like Maury Bamba. I love Trey Alexander's potential as an 18-year-old true freshman. We talked about Chris Wilcox. Well, there you go, right? Yeah. So I think they could go and get another guy out of the portal, and that would make me feel better about the cornerback spot. As for safeties, I love it. I mean, I think there's 5 guys you can throw out there this year and feel pretty good about them. Micah Harper, Raider Demooney, to me, that seems like the duo at the top for week 1. But guys like Talon Alfrey are going to have a lot to say about that. Crew Wakely and Ethan Slade played really, really well. And then Faletau Satuala, you saw a lot of high school ball last year. As soon as he figures out that playbook, you're not going to be able to keep him on the sideline. He's just too darn good.
Yeah, you want to talk about a football player, Fall Tao, man. Whew. Him and Ephraim, like you want to talk about pure ball players.
Yeah.
Those two may be in terms of just pure ball player mentality and just skill set. Those two might be the most thoroughbreds in that regard of BYU. They're just absolutely incredible.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, K, I'm going to leave this to you. Last thing from me. Anything else you want to get off your chest about BYU looking forward to the summer and obviously on into the season?
It's okay to be excited about it. I think that's the big message. I think that there's maybe BYU comes out and they go 4-8, and that will suck if it happens. But I think BYU's got more talent and more reason to feel optimistic about the future. We talked about the basketball schedule and how, hey, the basketball team might be better, but the rest of the Big 12 got better too. I don't think the rest of the Big 12 is that good. So BYU is going to have a chance to get back to a bowl game. You look at their schedule, they play the juggernauts of the conference, right? They got Kansas, K-State, and Utah. But beyond that, every other team has question marks just the same as BYU. And I think we as fans, we have a tendency to answer other people's questions really, really quickly. Like, hey, no, they're good. Baylor's quarterback situation, well, they got the Toledo. They're fine. They're just fine. They're an injury to Daquan Finn away from being an absolute disaster in Waco, right? So every team has question marks right now. So BYU fans, it's okay to be excited because the Cougars definitely got better this year. The quarterbacks, we'll see, but everything else got better this year. And if that quarterback position, look, Alan Bowman can take Oklahoma State to the Big 12 championship, then BYU can get back to a bowl with the quarterbacks that are in the room right now.
Amen to that. I'm with you on that. If Alan Bowman can do it, I think BYU can find somebody that can get it done as well. Okay, so where can people get this magazine? Once again, Jeff, I'm going to throw a link in the show notes, but let them know where they can get it.
Yeah, it's on a platform called Gumroad, so it's a little bit weird. So check the link in the show notes here. It's all over my Twitter. I'm just spamming everybody with Magazine Pub right now. So find me on Twitter, and you won't have to scroll far before you see a link to the magazine.
All right. Well, Jeff, thanks for taking the time. We'll have you on again down the road and chat some more football and hoops as well. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cougars. For Jeff, I'm Jake. The big thank you to all of you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. And I appreciate all of you for being everydayers with us as well. Until tomorrow, have a great rest of your day, everybody. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.